You're listening to Supervision with a Vision, where we discuss all things supervision. I'm your host, Sarah, professional counselor, marriage and family therapist, play therapist, eating disorder specialist, and cookie lover, with my co-host, Heather, marriage and family therapist, certified Together in Texas counselor, a Texas transplant from California, and outdoor adventurer. Hi, welcome to Supervision with a Vision. Today, Heather and I are talking about building trust with our supervisees. This week, we read Building Trust with Reluctant Clients, published in Counseling Today 2022. And Heather, the first step or the first point that our article made was the importance of validating.
Right. I think that when you are first starting a relationship, especially a supervision relationship that more than likely could last 3 years to 5 years, it could last a long time. Just the beginning steps is validate. Here we are, we're in this place. I talk to a lot of my supervisees about being kind of a guide. Like I'm not going to be like the leader and give you all the rules and examples all the time, but like I'm here to kind of facilitate some things that happen in therapy. When we talk in supervision, you're going to tell me something that happened to you in that moment, and we're going to discuss it. So validating what comes up for them, what happens, the role of a therapist.
Mm-hmm. What you said made me think just a week or two ago, a student emailed me, and this is a student that I haven't had in a little bit, but a short amount of time, emailed and said, I am really second guessing this decision to become a counselor. Is this normal?
Yes.
Yes, it is. You're okay.
Right.
Whew. But I think that about all different kinds of things. Their decision in a session,
right?
Their decision to be a counselor. There could be all kinds of things that we might be validating. And sure, I think that in the beginning, you do a whole lot of this.
At the very beginning with a supervisee that I haven't had, maybe, I think probably in about 3 years, she was working in a clinic-based situation where they did a lot of just like stacking your schedule, where you like saw a client, like maybe had 5 minutes for a note, saw another client, just kind of like that, back to back to back. And one of the very first things we talked about in supervision was like time management. She kept saying, well, I can't do this. I can't do, and I'm not prepped, and I'm spending 3 hours a night trying to prep for the next day. And I was like,
wow,
why are you doing that to yourself?
Yuck.
Because that's not, and it was validating, like, no, your frustration is normal.
Sure.
That's not how it really is.
Like I would feel that way too. If I thought I needed to spend 3 hours every evening prepping.
Trying to prep for the day that's coming up. That's not. So a lot of it's figuring out like where they're at and some of the skills that you are learning as a new therapist. Those are just learning curves. Those are, you're kind of just validating that, like, yes, that's the tricky stuff they don't teach you in school.
Right. Or that's hard to teach in school.
Right.
Not that they missed it.
Right.
You just can't teach all that stuff in school. What about, I feel like with some supervisees, I definitely get to a point where I'm pretty sick and tired of validating.
Yeah, because you want them to grow at some point. They shouldn't need you to validate every little thing that happens.
I mean, I feel like if I spend every hour, every week in supervision, helping them to feel better about something, that doesn't feel useful. I mean, it feels to me like they're not growing. Because if they were learning and getting better each week, they would be able to do some of that for themselves.
Right. And it does come back to trust. They also need to trust themselves. In that validation.
So we're building trust in the supervision process and in us as supervisors, but also helping them to learn to trust themselves.
Right.
The next point that we pulled from our article is the importance of creating an environment of acceptance without judgment.
Right. I think that can be a little, like you said, you can get tired of validating something and then you're like, why are we still talking about this? What's really happening? So you could get there pretty quick as far as feeling judgment, but finding that acceptance of like, we all go through this path. We all have some of the mistakes or some of the growing pains that happen for a therapist are pretty common. Like overbooking yourself, being, disclosing too much information about yourself. There's things that like you learn along the way as a new therapist that,
So you feel like you could think to yourself, oh, rookie mistake. Right. That's okay.
Right. That's all right. That happens.
You live and learn. You figure that out as you go.
Right. And again, it's part of that back to the validation, like trusting your gut, right? You learn to trust your own gut so that you don't have to get that validation all the time because you're very accepted.
So I like that. You're saying you're creating an environment of acceptance by hedging your own expectations.
Right.
That
Right.
you're saying, okay, well, of course they don't know that yet because they just got out of school
Right.
or they just started this new job.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to have some space for a learning curve.
Right.
But it's going to take a little while. And so you have that feeling. And so you're hoping that you're communicating that to them through what you're saying or what you're doing.
Right. And I think it's also part of when you give them that acceptance and it's also a dance with like the boundaries that you would have, the dance with like going back to the validation. Like if I've got someone that are constantly texting me or constantly emailing me that they need this reassurance all the time, well, again, that's back to the boundaries. And when you find that acceptance, it's like, oh, that's not really a bother anymore. That doesn't really happen anymore because you're accepting that this is where they're at and this is appropriate.
Okay, so that also sounds like you helping yourself with your expectations. So when there are more text messages, when there are more emails, that you've already kind of prepared yourself and thought, well, yes, of course, I'm going to have more of that right now. Right. They're new. You've prepared yourself to be patient for a while. Right. When I think of this, I think about all the ways that we give feedback. Mm-hmm. And I think when I was writing my dissertation, I would hand in a rough draft or a draft to my advisor, and he would hand it back. And there would be more red letters than there were black.
Yeah. Okay.
And it would just make me like, I'd open the email and have to go, oh, okay, I gotta look, I'm gonna have to read that later. Right. When I feel good and ready, I'll look at that more closely. And probably halfway through the process, he said like, okay, how's it going? What can I help you with? What do we need to work on? Is there anything I can do? And I said, yes, please quit using red. Any other color, green, blue, I don't care. But red just has become like the worst way to get feedback. Mm-hmm. So I think that if I'm listening to a new-ish supervisee and they're telling me about something that's happened, and in my head I'm thinking, wrong, wrong. I mean, changing at least the way that comes out and gets communicated, and working on me having maybe a more compassionate response, a patient response.
It is always challenging when you have supervisees at different points, right?
Yes.
Like having a brand new green one versus having someone that's hours are almost complete. It is very different, like what your expectation would be, but also what that relationship looks like. Like what the day-to-day looks like.
I like when maybe in group supervision or a triad, I have a supervisee that's pretty new and someone who's more seasoned or much farther along with their hours. And as I'm responding to the newer supervisee, my supervisee that I've been with for a while is looking at me like, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're...
I've already done this. Yeah.
And so they also get to see and appreciate a different facet of that they're seeing, oh, I see how Sarah did not squash them because they, whatever, didn't make an abuse report or didn't get the confidentiality paperwork signed before Sarah went, okay, so what would you do different next time? Mm-hmm. Or how could you make that better the next time you do it? That they're noting and realizing, oh, okay. So I think for them, which is the purpose of triadic supervision, is that they're getting to see from a different perspective how to give feedback or how to like mitigate the feedback.
Right. I think it's also great when my supervisee that's been with me longer can also add something. Yeah. Something. And like, I love that because it shows me that they're building that confidence, that they're like, oh yes, I worked in a job where I had to make CPS reports. It was part of my job. And then they can help, oh, and did you know this trick? Or they can say something else that reminds me of like, so we did that,
The last point in the article this week was check yourself. And you and I talked a little bit about this point, and we thought this could have more than one meaning, maybe. I think check yourself could mean, like we just talked about, the way that you're giving feedback or the way, or being, creating that environment of acceptance and not judgment. So you might have to check yourself and think, no, I'm not going to say,
red flag.
You're out of here. But instead, you slow down and think, okay, how do I deliver feedback in a way that's patient?
And that has a process behind it. Or that, I remind myself often, just wait Just wait, give it space. You don't have to give them the answer right here in the moment.
I think the finesse is giving feedback and being able to validate at the same time.
Yes. I think that's very important, especially for the fresh out of school.
Okay, so that's one way that you might check yourself, is being careful with the way that you're giving feedback or the environment that you're creating. What's another way that you might check yourself in the way that you're building trust or validating?
I always find it a little like put yourself in check a little bit when you've got a supervisee that maybe is working for somewhere else, whether it's at a school or at a clinic or whatever, that you aren't the only, you might be their clinical supervisor, but they have to answer to management. And sometimes what we in the therapy world would say as a step is not the same. And so sometimes it's about taking that breath and saying, okay, I'm not the only person that supervisee answers to. They also have to answer.
That's important, because I'm not all of them, but some of them feel very caught in the middle. We're not in charge everywhere.
Right.
And we also know that the settings that we work in, as well as every other counseling setting, has things that they can improve on. So there's not an agency out there that doesn't have something that they could get better at or improve on. So each one of our supervisees is going to be in a situation like that, where it might not be ideal or perfect or done with the best ethical standards or professionalism every time, but we're working towards that.
Right. That's the goal.
I think this could also mean not just the way you give feedback, but if creating or building trust is a process, then we could check ourselves and ask, have we gotten to a place that reasonably our supervisees feel like they can trust us?
Right.
Feel like they can trust the supervision setting? That it does take that. And supervision can be really vulnerable. So we need to help them get to a place where they can feel trusting.
Your supervisee isn't coming to you with the big things they're struggling with, and we aren't serving them. We're not doing what's better globally, what's better for mental health. We're just keeping them kind of stuck in their box of like, well, you just don't know because you're new. If we keep saying that, then you're not allowing that growth to happen.
Not just, I'm thinking stuck in a box of the restraints of what we do in counseling, but even for themselves, as we're helping our clients, we're also learning and changing.
Right.
So maybe through their counseling practice and then through supervision, not that we're their therapist, but maybe they need to begin to explore
some other things.
Some countertransference. And is this supervision setting safe enough to do that? Yet, because it can't instantly be that safe. Have you had any supervisees that you thought, yep, you came to me with something that was pretty sensitive?
Yes. I've had, actually, I'm not going to say every supervisee, but a lot of times you hit this mark, and I would say it's in the middle. I don't think it's at the end or at the beginning, but in the middle of supervision, where they start to really make the connection of doing therapy as work. Like that's your job. You're there helping facilitate therapy for people, but we have our thoughts and feelings about it. And I think in school, we all write papers about how we're going to handle countertransference and all these things. But when it's actually happening, it is something. And I try and pick up on it, and I won't say press someone to find it, but wow, you just had a session with a 14-year-old about sex. That seems heavy. How did that go? And what are some of the deeper things about it? And letting them bring up, topics that they didn't realize they'd be dealing with.
I like that you said it doesn't happen in the beginning. It doesn't really happen at the end. It happens kind of in the middle. That's so reflective of Yalom and group dynamics, right? The reason it doesn't happen in the beginning is because we're still building trust.
We're holding it. And
the reason it doesn't happen as much in the end is because even unconsciously, we're kind of packing up. Going, oh, okay.
See you later, bye.
Yeah, we're almost done. So I'm going to wrap things up mentally and emotionally. And so, then the meat of it is right in the middle.
Right.
Is there a way? How do you know if you have reached that point? It sounds like because they're bringing important things to you. How do you know if you haven't reached that with them?
That's a tricky question. I almost feel like it's a feeling, right? It's like a gauge. You can gauge where you're at with it. Or if you ask a question and instead of them giving you an answer, they deflect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Avoid it somehow.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're not there yet.
Yeah. So maybe you're saying hey, you just had a session with a 14-year-old and you talked about sex. How are you? How did that feel? And they're like, good.
Totally fine.
I think I nailed it.
You're
that might be Okay, maybe you did nail it,
maybe
but
you really did.
that doesn't feel like that's the totality of how
Right.
you're feeling about it.
Right.
So if you're saying the opportunity arises to talk about something that could be more vulnerable or personal, and they sidestep it.
Right.
They're like, okay, not there yet. Would you do anything differently or change courses if you realized, yeah, there's stuff that we could be talking about and going farther with, and you're kind of avoiding it? Would you do anything to help them build trust or do something different? Yeah. What would you do?
I think I would just make comment about it. Like I know this is going to be hard or it's struggle, or maybe I would give like my own reflection of dealing with that, like a hard situation. I probably wouldn't let it lie for too long. I'm not saying you wouldn't get off the hook maybe for a couple weeks, but after that, it's probably going to come on. I also like to mix things up in supervision and like, oh, this week we're doing this.
Yeah.
If we don't have anything major to talk about, we're doing this instead.
I think, hearing you say that out loud, I think that what I do or would do is really comparable to what I would do with a client that's doing that. But I'm in charge, so I get to be a little
more straightforward.
Yeah. So I think with a client or a supervisee, I might say, okay, well, your homework this week is that you think about that some more. Or that's how I would say it to a client. If I was going to say it to a supervisee, I might get even more specific. Okay, I want your homework this week is to come back and have like 2 or 3 points or 2 or 3 ideas of what this means to you. Or
give it some thought.
Yeah. But I also would use sand tray.
Oh, I love that.
Get them to create a sand tray reflective of the situation. And I think with clients and supervisees, that could be it, or you might still not quite achieve your goal because maybe they are defensive to the point where it's not going to be reflected in their sand tray, but it might.
Right.
If I feel like that's not up their alley, it's just not their personality, I might ask them to write about it a little bit as a way of
to kind of get that reflection going.
Yeah, continuing to think about it. But like sand tray or some other expressive activity, when they do come back, I'm not going to make them like read it to me.
Yeah, fair, dude.
This is what I did for my homework.
Right.
But I think I would ask, I'd revisit it.
Right.
Like, okay, so what'd you think? Oh, I don't know. I think if we got to that point and I'm still feeling resistance, I would probably like reflect it and wrap it up and just say, yep, that sounds like a hard topic. We might have to keep thinking about that later.
Right.
So validating, providing feedback in an environment of acceptance, and then checking ourselves. I think maybe would you summarize and say, checking yourself means knowing where we are at in this process.
Right. What
with
piece
them.
of it. Right.
What could we do? What have we already done? Assessing where we are in helping to build trust.
And if you don't know, ask yourself, what do they think about me? If you ask what your don't actually ask them, just think through like, what do they think about me? Do they, and that might lead you down the path of figuring out where you're at with your supervisee.
It does make me think, what if we just ask them, what do you think about me? Maybe not exactly in that way.
You're great. We really love supervision. Yeah. It's all fine.
Yeah. It'd be interesting. Well, if they're not very trusting, that's definitely what they're giving you. Well, thanks today for listening to Supervision with a Vision. We would love to hear about how you handle a supervisee that's having a hard time building trust in supervision. You've been listening to Supervision with a Vision. Head on over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Therapy Academy to join the conversation and get show notes. We'll be back next week with more Supervision with a Vision.